You're listening to The Resilient Animal. I'm Annie Petersen, Doctor of Education with a Master's in Mental Health Recovery and Trauma-Informed Care. This podcast is an exploration of how helping other living beings can benefit human mental health and well-being, and what makes us all resilient animals. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of the Resilient Animal Podcast. Today, I'm really excited because I am talking to Brooke Haggerty from Faunalytics, and which I love the name of that nonprofit organization. So welcome, Brooke. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor to join your podcast today.
So, Brooke, first of all, I want you to share with everyone who you are and just kind of your journey into where you are today. And then I definitely want to learn more about Faunalytics, and you can let everybody know about that organization as well.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you again. So my name is Brooke Haggerty. I am a lifelong animal advocate. I actually had the very wonderful pleasure of growing up with a mother who rescued animals, and we always had animals in our house of all kinds of different species. So like many people probably listening in today, that was my childhood. And in high school, I actually raised a seeing eye dog for a nonprofit that trains and provides seeing eye dogs for the blind. And so that was my first official volunteer gig in the animal nonprofit world, and got to raise Avery for 18 months. And then one of the hardest moments of my life, give him away. But that was a really meaningful experience and put my foot in the door to what would eventually become my life and my career. When I was in college, I got really involved with Grassroots animal activism. I went vegetarian and then a little bit after that vegan, and became very involved with an organization here in San Diego that advocated for a variety of different species here in the San Diego community. So whether that's harbor seals in La Jolla, or the fight to shut down puppy mill pet stores, or any other issues that really affect animals here in San Diego. And then also involved in street activism, trying to promote awareness about factory farming and the reality of how animals we think of as food are treated in their short lives here, and how humans really have morphed this industry into something quite terrible for animals. And that really was a passion of mine. Quite swiftly, I got involved in that work and was part of Prop 2, in California in 2008, which would later be Prop 12 in 2018. For a little bit of my life, I was part of a group called the FACE Foundation, which is the Foundation for Animal Care and Education, which is how I met our wonderful host of this podcast, and got to oversee an organization that provides financial support for families who can't afford to save their beloved animal when finances are in the way and nothing else. But I realized in my wonderful time with that organization that I felt like I wasn't making enough of an impact. I really wanted to do more for animals in the time I have. FACE has a very worthy mission, but at the end of the day, I couldn't help but feel like I needed to do more. And so that was when I joined the 2018 Prop 12 coalition here in California, which passed in November of 2018 by a wide margin, where voters recognize that we want animals treated a little bit better, animals in the food system. And so Prop 12 gave animals in factory farms essentially more room to move around. I want it to be clear that their living conditions are still atrocious, and that this is an industry that should not be supported by anyone because of the abuses put on animals and humans as well. But let's make their lives better in the ways that we can while we can. After Prop 12 was when I found Faunalytics. So my master's degree is actually in human behavior, and I always had a real passion for understanding how humans work. What is it that gets us motivated? What is it that gives us our beliefs and our way of thinking? And Faunalytics combined my love for animals and animal advocacy with my interests in how humans tick. And so Faunalytics is a nonprofit organization that conducts and shares research to make animal advocacy as effective as possible.
Right.
So we work behind the scenes to help the animal protection movement save animals' lives.
Right. I want to take a couple steps back before we talk more about Faunalytics. One thing I love about doing this podcast is speaking to learning during the podcast, and that's what the intention is to help get information out to a wider audience, but also talking to people I have learned from in the past. And as Brooke mentioned, we did work together at FACE, and Brooke was the amazing executive director there. And one thing that I really felt safe in speaking to Brooke about why we should explore vegetarianism and veganism. And because I've asked people in the past, why did you become vegan? And I've gotten a pretty wide range of answers. And especially after a number of years ago when the and I'm doing air quotes, cage free for California poultry, that law was passed. But it's not cage free. And so I was able to learn a lot from Brooke about factory farming. Can you just maybe remind me, and then educate our audience, for those that need it, to discuss what cage free means, and then we can jump forward a little bit with Faunalytics. And I know that there was some research that was done. I'm not exactly sure when, but why as humans we purchase certain foods that have certain labels attached to them, and what we need to know regarding what those labels mean.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you asking that question. It is always interesting to me to hear how people follow their journey to veganism or plant-based lifestyle. For me, I definitely made that choice out of ethical reasons. It wasn't for my own health, and it wasn't for the environment either. That wasn't quite as talked about when I first made this change. For me, it was all about the animals. I grew up very much aware of animals' sentience, their intelligence, their ability to feel joy and pain, and their ability to suffer, certainly. And so for me, I wanted no part of contributing to that. I see animals that humans exploit as just as worthy as any other group of protection and, again, freedom. They can feel the way we do, whether that's emotional, physical. It's something I wanted to just remove myself from, any exploitation of animals, to the best that I can in this world that we live in. So for context, in 2022, which is the latest data we have from the Food and Animal Agriculture Organization, 82 billion land animals were slaughtered around the world. 82 billion. That doesn't include non-land animals. So that doesn't include fishes, other invertebrates, other species. And that number is incomprehensible to us. So more animals die in a given year than humans have existed in all of history. So I think in the animal protection movement, we have some people that are working on what we call animal welfare campaigns, and some people that are more animal freedom or animal liberation work. And in farmed animal advocacy, there are these two avenues that are taking different paths and different approaches, but at the end of the day, we all are working toward the same goal of better lives for animals and changing this system. In California, the two propositions that passed that we were referring to, Prop 2 and then Prop 12, are probably the most progressive farmed animal welfare laws in the world. So for clarity, farmed animals are not part of other laws that protect animals, like companion animals. They are excluded from any of those laws. Similarly to animals used in science and experimentation, they're not counted or part of that. So these propositions in California were huge, huge steps for us as animal advocates. And cage-free is one of the many areas, as you rightfully note, that people are confused by. Anything that is a phrase or a label or an image is pretty much not understood by your average person. And in some cases, they're effectively meaningless. So the laws were very specific about what they would regulate. Essentially, animals used for certain things. So certain egg-laying hens, not broiler hens, as calves for veal, certain animals with certain end use were included in this legislation to give them more room to move around. Now, that doesn't mean they're twirling on Austrian hilltops with all the room to play and run and be themselves. That means they get access to, cage-free environments either part of the day, or in cases of some egg-laying hens, it means they're in cage-free systems, but they're cramped in there. And so even though they might not technically be in a cage, they really are. It's just the cage is now the barn as opposed to a small cage that gives them no room. So cage-free is, again, step toward better welfare for farmed animals. And Prop 12 in particular was upheld by the Supreme Court of the United States recently, but they are not what anyone I know in the animal advocacy community would call good enough. It is really quite sad when you see the reality, whether it's an animal in a cage or in a cage-free system. Similarly, what we refer to as humane washing are the labels that consumers see on products that say humanely raised or cage-free, or it's a picture of a happy cow, or the phrase happy cow. Anything that we see on a label, it is a good bet that it is not regulated. And if it is a label that's regulated, it's a good bet that it's not regulated as well as the public would think. So studies have shown that people really do want better environments for animals, even people who are dedicated meat eaters. They too don't want the horror that we currently unleash on animals we use for food. So there's a lot of public support for better animal welfare, but there's not really a match between how people shop because labels are so misleading and because there's a lack of understanding as to what those labels mean. So we just did a study recently that found that only like 9% of participants in a virtual experiment we did, a shopping experiment, correctly identified what a certain label meant, and others had no idea what it meant. And we created a label that didn't mean anything, and they thought it had actual animal welfare protections behind it. So labeling education both needs to be improved to get people to understand that most labels don't actually mean anything, or the ones that do, the regulation behind them is very sparse. Mm-hmm. You have one person checking the animals are in compliance with this label like once a year, and they announce that they're coming to check on the conditions before they come, right? So I think that's a big thing is label education, but I think also the litigation work that animal advocates are doing to fight false advertising is incredibly important, and companies should be held accountable for lying to consumers about how they treat animals.
Right. Yeah, the marketing behind so many of these businesses is I wish that they would invest as much money in caring for the animals as they do in marketing that they care for the animals. And I want us all to remember the term humane washing. I think that that's a really powerful term that we all as consumers need to remember. So as you can tell, Faunalytics does a lot of research. So can you just tell us a little bit about how and why Faunalytics was founded, and then what you're doing today along with what you just described?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things to talk about. Excuse me, my voice cracked. I was so excited about it. All right, so Faunalytics is the research branch of animal advocacy. So think about, what you just said, Annie. Companies spend a ton of money into things like marketing, things to understand how to influence and sway consumers, the public, lawmakers, policy. A ton of money is invested into keeping the status quo, and in some cases making things worse as we push to make more and more money. What happens? Animals suffer even further. And the people who work in these industries as well, slaughterhouse workers, for example, experience a ton of physical and mental harm. So Faunalytics was established in 2000 to serve as the research branch for animal advocates. We in the animal protection community are very passionate people, right? Every animal advocate I've met has a lot of passion and compassion and really just fierce dedication to the work we're doing. But a lot of our work is gut driven. What do we think is going to work? What do our emotions tell us is going to affect people? How are we going to sway people and get them to do what we want? The answer for decades was, we don't know, we're going to guess. And so Faunalytics, to the credit of our founder, Che Green, was the first to come into the playing field and say, we should be researching this. Just like any for-profit company does market research before they roll out a product, or, polling to understand how the public is going to respond to something. That's what we need to be doing too. So Faunalytics was established to help animal advocates be as effective as possible. We want to put research and data into the animal protection community because animal organizations lack the resources to do this themselves. So we do that for them. We conduct and share research through the lens of animal advocacy. So just like there's Google Scholar to search for academic research, Faunalytics does the legwork of finding the most relevant research for animal advocates across a wide variety of topics and synthesizing information in a way that gets the key points across to advocates so that they don't have to read long research papers. So our research library has a collection of about 6,000 summaries of external research on every topic you could think of. Farmed animal advocacy, certainly, companion animal work, shelters, what's the most effective way to get animals adopted, or how to keep animals in environments that lead to higher adoption rates, for example. There's research, animals used in entertainment, animals used in working conditions, wild animals. We have something for everyone, no matter what your passion is, in our library. And then we also conduct our own research. For example, the humane washing study I just mentioned, we recently conducted that study. And we choose about 8 studies a year for our own research agenda. And our focus there is to try to be as impactful as possible, to either help a large number of animal advocates and therefore a large number of animals, or we also do what we call meta-topic research. For example, we did a study looking at compensation in the farmed animal protection space and how that compares to other sectors of nonprofit work, and how we might want to do better to ensure that we build a movement that really has quite a bit of people power in a sustainable way. So we do research on capacity building, on meta topics. We do research on individual advocacy and techniques on the individual grassroots level. We do research on political and legislative advocacy. For example, we have 2 studies coming up, one looking at effective communication with political staffers. How can grassroots advocates and lobbyists in our movement best engage with the staffers, who are often the first barrier toward a politician? We're also doing an experiment looking at voter response to politicians who are pro-animal. Animal issues are often seen as bipartisan, believe it or not, and they're not always highlighted, or rarely, if ever, highlighted in a political campaign, but they're important to voters. And so how can candidates frame pro-animal messaging, or dare I say it, anti-subsidy messaging, in a way that still leads them to be effective in their campaign and ultimately get more people in power? We're also doing a lot of research to engage youth. Youth is the future, of course, as we all know. And so we're doing a case study looking at an education program's impact on their students. And we're also doing a study looking at Gen Z. How do they think about animal advocacy and environmental advocacy? And what are their barriers to getting involved, whether professionally or in a volunteer capacity? And how can we grow our movements in light of this new passionate generation that's part of the workforce now? So we have our hands in many pots, as it were, and our goal is to just be as useful as possible to anyone working to advance animal protection.
I love speaking with you, Brooke. I feel that, and what you said is so true. People want to be involved in animal welfare. It really is a gut response, that need to want to help animals. Unfortunately, in some organizations and some individuals, it's to the point where they almost shame people for not believing what they believe, or they don't take the same actions that they
Yeah.
take. And there's no surefire way to push people away from your cause than to make them feel badly for not believing in what you believe. And I think that educating people is definitely the best way to help them understand what it is, what point you're trying to make. And I also love the point that you made about talking about animal welfare issues in politics. Not our current president, but a previous president that we had. I remember when he didn't have a White House pet. And people were just completely up in arms about that. Just, you don't have a White House pet. It really made a difference to a lot of people and I think it said a lot, but that's just me.
Can this person really be trusted? There's no animal companion here.
Exactly. One thing I wanted to mention is that Faunalytics does have online conferences. Is it a couple conferences a year, or one conference a year, or tell us a little bit.
Happy to. So in addition to our original research program and our research library, the third program of ours is our research support program. And that involves a few things, which one of is a conference. So our annual symposium, Fauna Connections, is a virtual conference every September. It's free to attend because we are really, really passionate about accessibility here. Not just accessibility in terms of removing price barriers, but in removing language barriers, taking away academic jargon and boiling it down to what we need to really care about. So the conference is free to attend, it's virtual, and our goal is to bridge the advocacy community with the academic community. So spoilers, academics do care about animals too, but the academic world is quite a bit different from really any other world, I would imagine, but definitely from animal advocacy. But Faunalytics walks in both of those worlds. As a research organization that conducts work for advocates, we really get to enjoy the wonder that is academia advocacy and just, quote, average animal advocacy. And so our goal is to find the latest research that is as relevant as possible to animal advocates. A lot of research from academia sometimes is quite interesting, but it's not necessarily as applicable to work happening on the ground. So we work really hard to find the latest research that's really going to be immediately useful to people working every day on animal advocacy issues. And we have a symposium all about it. And so it's really, really fun to hear the latest research, hear what's coming out. And the important part of our symposium are the breakout sessions afterwards. So advocates have time, they can join any presenter for Q&A to really dive into a particular topic that's interesting to them. And our hope is that it builds community, and we've gotten really great feedback that people leave the event feeling really inspired. I think that's true for a lot of conferences, certainly in our sector, that hopefully you learn, but if nothing else, you feel reinvigorated that you're not alone in this work, that there are other people who care about the work you're doing too. So Fauna Connections, mark your calendar, every September. We have a little ways right now, but if you sign up for our email letter, you'll get notified. And then the other work in our research support program is our office hours. So if you are an animal advocate, and again, that doesn't mean you have to be employed in the animal protection movement. You can be a volunteer, someone who's just passionate. Maybe you're doing your own work and contacting your legislators on your own time. Animal advocate can take a lot of forms. If you are someone who's working on animal advocacy in any way, we have pro bono office hours where you can come to us, talk to one of our team members, either a research scientist or a research liaison, or our resource director, who has so much experience in the movement. If you need help finding data, applying data to your work, figuring out what research exists, if it doesn't exist already, figuring out how you might be able to do it, even if you're not a researcher. Our goal is to really help animal advocates apply research to their work, and we take out a lot of that legwork for you because we're already swimming in the data, so we can find it easily. So our free office hours are weekly in a few different time zones with a few different languages to accommodate more folks.
Okay.
So come say hi.
That's great. Yeah, and I think when you were saying accessibility, that makes such a difference, and especially in animal welfare, because we're just raking in so much money. So
We sure are,
Yeah.
right? We're oh goodness, our movement. I cannot wait to celebrate the day that animals and environment gets more than 3% of all charitable giving. It has
Yeah.
been static at that number my entire professional life, and I will throw a party when we get a little bit bigger piece of that pie, Annie.
Right. Well, we need more politicians with White House pets. so, so Brooke, I typically don't ask people this because it's so tough, and maybe it's a little unfair. But what's your favorite animal?
Oh, that's not the question I was expecting. You know, it is a really tough question, and one that I don't know if I have a favorite, but I'd rather share moments of connection. So not that these animals are my favorite species, because I don't have one.
Right.
I truly
I
am.
know, and that's why I don't ask that question.
You know, it's
But
a
I
tough
thought
one.
I'd ask Brooke.
Yeah. So if I can give three quick of existential moments in my life with animals. The first was an experience where I was snorkeling and came across a sea turtle. And the moment in the water, just floating and swimming together with a sea turtle, if anyone else has had that experience, they know exactly what I'm talking about. There's something so peaceful and just awe-inspiring about being near a sea turtle. They are doing their own thing in their environment, and you're just an observer. And I must have spent an hour just floating nearby to watch that sea turtle. And it brought me, the experience brought me just immense peace and gratitude for just life on this earth, and that sea turtle, he or she, just living as they should be, I think is a really meaningful experience to me. Similarly, I've had the opportunity to do a little bit of traveling in my life, and I've had a few connections where I've gotten to see elephants in their natural environment, and one in particular where I feel like we made eye contact, and there's probably a good chance a likelihood that it was just this elephant looking around, and I felt like like she looked at me in that moment. But again, that connection, these moments where you get to experience an animal as their own being, living their lives in the way they should, not behind bars of a zoo, but in their own environment, living in a way that, to the best of their ability, is unaffected by humans, really has reaffirmed my passion for the work I'm doing, and reminds me that even when this is hard, this is my calling. And then similarly, meeting animals who are farmed, or in case of most of us who do get to meet farmed animals, they're at sanctuaries. I know sanctuaries are a focus of this podcast. They do such important work. And meeting animals on these farms, you just get to see so much personality, and you get to see how similar both cows and pigs are to dogs and children. they're not that different when you just watch their behavior.
Pigs are so smart. Oh my goodness.
They're so smart. Looking into the eyes of a cow, or the eyes of a pig, or the eyes of a chicken, these animals are complex beings. And those moments of connection are what stand out to me, and really, again, help me keep going when work does get hard and when life gets hard.
Yeah, I mean, I think that all of us who've worked in animal welfare know the term compassion fatigue very well. And it's tough. Yes, it's tough. For example, if you're working for a humane organization that deals with a lot of intake, but also, as when you're in research, reading about all these different types of situations that animals are in, that can be a lot of tough information to keep in your brain constantly. So I always learn from you, Brooke, and so this is what I'm gonna do. I'm not gonna ask people their favorite animal. I'm gonna ask them favorite moments with an animal. So, but yeah, I gotta say, the first time I saw a cow binky, that jump up in the air, oh my goodness, it was the most joyful. I didn't know that cows could binky. But they totally do. They totally kick up their heels. And when they, like this cow knew that her mom was coming out with treats, boy, was she happy. She was happy.
And to be able to see the world as it is in those moments, I think requires a little bit of discipline, right? We grow up being told by everyone in our environment, our society, that something is normal, right? And this is not just animal issues, right? This is a lot of issues, but we grow up not questioning that we're eating meat, not questioning that we have a cat next to us, but that we're eating this other animal that's just as sentient. And we just never really have the reason to critically reflect on whether this is something that we're okay with. Just like I think many people who work in companion animal work, let's say you're driving down the side of the road and you see a dog limping and in pain and hurt, maybe this dog just got hit by a car. I would argue that anyone listening to this podcast would stop their car and pull over, right? And figure out what to do about this dog. And at the same time, many people, formerly myself, who were helping companion animals, still ate other animals. And I just hope that people try to critically reflect on why they're doing this and really address that cognitive dissonance that's so strong, that's really hard to break. And I'll just put it out there that it's not about being perfect, right? It's about learning these things, being open to what you're learning, being critical with your own thoughts and what you are okay with morally, and taking steps, one baby step at a time, if that's what it takes, into a lifestyle that you feel is aligned with your values as an animal lover. Right. So that's just hopefully something that is a little bit more inspiring and not daunting. It's not about being perfect. I think it's about being self-aware and aligning our values with our actions.
Right. Thank you, Brooke. I feel so good. I just feel, it makes me feel good when I talk to guests on this podcast and speaking to you. It's thank you.
Likewise.
I want to thank Brooke Haggerty for joining us from Faunalytics. Oh, and Brooke, can you tell us and I'll have put all this information in the show notes, but how people can get in touch with you, how they can access information for Faunalytics, and again, I'll have it in the show notes as well.
Perfect, my pleasure. So faunalytics.org, that's faunalytics.org, think animals and analytics. And you can go there to browse our library, create a free account so you can create your own animal advocacy library. You can sign up for our monthly newsletter where all the latest research on whatever topics interest you come to your email every month. I am very proud of our email open rate. It's one people actually open, and to me that says a world of good. So subscribe to our newsletter. If you're an animal lover, it's going to be good stuff.
I'm subscribed, so there.
Sure, there you go, right? It's just about staying informed, right? There's a lot of information that's thrown at us, and this is the interesting stuff that you'll get. And we're also, as a nonprofit, we are also very, very grateful for donations. All of the work that we do for animal advocates is free to animal advocates. So there's no paywall to access our research. There's no ticket fees to attend our symposium. The work we do for office hours is pro bono. Everything we do is for the animal advocacy community, and that's only possible thanks to our donors. So faunalytics.org/donate. And if you don't have the ability to give financially, we also do accept volunteers for our research library. If you're interested about writing about animal research and synthesizing and summarizing that information for animal advocates, this could be a great volunteer gig for you. But please follow us on socials as well. Again, we really try to focus on the research. Sometimes there are really exciting ways that we can highlight work being done in our movement that's uplifting. And so I hope that our work is educational for people, but also motivating. So check us out, faunalytics.org.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Brooke. And again, it's just always a joy speaking with you. I really appreciate your time, and we will talk to you soon.
Likewise. Thank you again so much for having me.